Hello everyone. Today, let us go back again to the world of microorganism. Let us talk about taxonomy. Taxonomy, it is the science of identifying different organisms, classifying them into categories, and naming them. All organisms, both living and extinct, are classified into distinct groups with other similar organisms and given a scientific name. It looks that taxonomy basically figuring out where all those branches of evolutionary tree are and finding some convenient labels to help us remember all those remarkable into relationships. Taxonomy ain't just about describing life and all those ridiculous details. It is supposed to be helping human being understand it because it's way complicated without a structure. The classification of organisms has various hierarchical categories. Categories gradually shift from being very broad and including many different organisms to very specific and identifying single species. Biologists use the taxonomic system to classify all organisms on Earth. This is called phylogenetic tree or the tree of life. There are 8 distinct taxonomic categories. These are domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. With each step down in classification, organisms are split into more and more specific groups. For example, all of the animals in the kingdom Animalia are split into multiple phyla, the plural of phylum. All animals in the phylum Chordata are split into multiple classes such as mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. The broadest category splits all organisms into 3 groups called domains. The 3 domains of life are bacteria, archaea, and eukaryota. I'll define those taxonomic groups in the phylogenetic tree of life. What is kingdom? Kingdom, for a long time ago, all life was separated into 5 or 6 kingdoms. This includes kingdoms such as animals, plants, fungi, protists, archaea, and bacteria. Phylum. A phylum, plural is phyla, is still a very broad classification, but it splits into kingdoms into multiple groups. An example of phyla from the animal kingdom is Arthropoda, which includes all insects, spiders, crustaceans, and more. All vertebrate animals belong to one phylum called Chordata. Invertebrates are separated into many different phyla. Class. The class is the next level down. As mentioned earlier, some classes from the phylum Chordata includes mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. Arthropods classes include the likes of insects and arachnids like spiders, mites, and scorpions. Order and family. From class, organisms are placed into order and then a family. Using grasses as an example from the plant kingdom, they belong to the order Poles and the family Poaceae. Genus and species. The final two categories are genus and species. The genus and species that an organism belongs to are how an organism receives its scientific name. This naming system is called binomial nomenclature and was invented by a brilliant biologist named Carl Linnaeus. An identified species is placed into a specific group in each of these categories. For example, the taxonomy classification of human is domain, Eukaryota, kingdom, Animalia, phylum, Chordata, class, Mammalia, order, primates, family, Hominidae, genus, Homo, species, Homo sapiens. Here is a phrase that you can use to help you remember is King Philip came over from Germany swimming. That is a one technique or a mnemonics where you can remember the phylogenetic tree of life. Who is Carl Linnaeus? Carl Linnaeus was a Swedish naturalist from the 18th century and is considered the father of taxonomy. It was him who first began to separate organisms into hierarchical categories. He also developed the system that we use to name new species called binomial nomenclature. He was credited with identifying over 10,000 different plant and animals species in his lifetime, more than any other biologist. What is binomial nomenclature? It is using unique two-part name for every species, the genus and its species name. Determining relatedness among organisms. How can we determine that an organism is related to another organism? Let us know first what is an organism. An organism refers to a living thing that has an organized structure, can react to stimuli, can reproduce, and can maintain homeostasis. An organism would therefore be any animal, fungus, protist, plant, bacterium, or archaeon on Earth. How are they related? There are many various hypotheses as to the origin of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. Because all cells are similar in nature, it is generally thought that all cells came from common ancestor cell termed last universal common ancestor, Yrikka. Similarities are often to see when one looks at two organisms that evolved from a common ancestor, and until recently, looking at physical features and behaviors was the only way to determine how closely related two organisms are. However, now scientists can also analyze DNA to discover how closely organisms are related. Every living creature has DNA, which has a lot of inherited information about how the body builds itself. Scientists can analyze the DNA of two organisms. The more similar the DNA, the more closely related the organisms. This method can also help when looks can be deceiving. In scientific terms, the evolutionary history and the relationship of an organism or group of organisms is called phylogeny. A phylogeny describes the relationship of an organism to which species it is most closely related, and so forth. Scientists used a tool called phylogenetic tree to show the evolutionary pathways and connections among organisms. A phylogenetic tree is a diagram used to reflect evolutionary relationship among organisms or group of organisms. Scientists considered phylogenetic tree to be a hypothesis of the evolutionary past, since one cannot go back to confirm the proposed relationships. In other words, a tree of life can be constructed to illustrate when different organisms evolved and to show the relationship among different organisms. Always remember that to determine how an organism is related to another organism, one must go back to its ancestor cells or look to its phylogenetic tree to know their evolutionary relationship.